I think we had a start full of action 2 minutes ago. I can beat that down. Nothing, nobody really get hurt, but yeah. Crazy. Yeah, good morning. Thanks for coming to first Puppet Camp here. I don't want to steal your time. Just want to say thanks to all the speakers for today. Thanks to Puppet Labs for supporting us. And then just handing over to James Turnbull. Thanks for coming over. Thanks for having the first keynote, and have a good and a wonderful day, and tweet a lot. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm James Turnbull from Puppet Labs. I'm the VP of Technical Operations, which means I deal with most of the customer-facing side of the business. I wanted to start off to thank Bernd and the team at NETWAYS who put on an amazing event. Well, hopefully it'll be an amazing event, but I'm sure it will be. I went to some of the open source monitoring stuff yesterday, and that was really good fun. I'm sorry I didn't come earlier to go to that, actually, as well. So I'm going to talk this morning a little bit about what I'm calling the state of the nation, which is a mix of two things. It's a little bit about where the Puppet Labs is, where the Puppet Labs community is, and a bit about technology, about what things that are in Puppet 3 and things we're looking to do in the future. And then one of my colleagues, Ralph, is going to finish up, talk a little bit about the Puppet certification program, which we launched at PuppetConf a couple of weeks ago. My email address and contact details are there. I'm relatively easy to find on the internet and a bunch of other places. So where we were, so this is as of the start of 2011. The membership was mailing list membership, about 3,000 people. We had about 600 messages a month. We had about 400 people on the channel, and only had about 50 modules on the Forge, and the Forge was kind of crap at the time. And this is where we are now. So in a year or so, or less than a year, we've doubled the mailing list, doubled the number of messages, doubled the size of the people in the IRC channel, significantly added to the number of people on GitHub, and we have 500 modules on the Forge. So we've had a lot happen. And we've had a lot of the community, not only the community growing, we've had a lot of development work and a lot of changes. And in some respects, we're trying to deal with all of those changes currently. And so I'm going to talk about a little bit about what's next. Firstly, one of the things we've done over the last 18 months or so has not been very good at communicating with you. And that's because the organization also grew from about 200 to about 20 people to about 110 people in about 10, 12 months. As a result, any organisation that grows that fast, things can be a little bit dysfunctional. So we're going to get better about telling you what's happening. And you'll see some more communication on this from the engineering team in the next couple of weeks. Make some more decisions in public. We're really interested in hearing, particularly on the open source side of things, what you guys are interested in and what you guys are interested in being involved in. Work together on the roadmap, and you'll see a bit of stuff coming out from Deepak, who is one of the directors of engineering who runs the platform team, who look after the Puppet open source project, about working together on roadmap and design. And we're going to try and be open by default, and we've started to publish a bit more about what we define as being open. So for those of you aware, a couple of years ago we changed the license of Puppet from GPL to Apache, and the reason we did that was to allow a bunch of our partners to be able to integrate the tool. That didn't necessarily make everyone happy, but from our perspective, the growth of Puppet has expanded significantly in terms of the people we're partnered with since then. But one of the aspects of that is it's sometimes hard to work out what is open source about Puppet Labs and what isn't. So we make it really clear that by default, everything underneath, the platform itself, Puppet, Factor, Hero, all those things will always be open source. The things that Puppet Labs is going to make money off, the commercial applications we're going to make, are going to be things like dashboards and analytics, things that are GUIs that most of our open source user base are not interested in using. But our Puppet Enterprise user base, who tend to be a bit more commercial and focus, will be actually interested in. Before I get to that, one of the reasons that one of the solutions to the problem of the fact we've not been hugely open is our community management function has passed between about two different people, and who've also been doing 2 or 3 other jobs at the same time. So I wanted to introduce Dawn Foster. Dawn is up the back there. She's going to stand up and wave. Dawn joined us 2 weeks ago, I think, and she actually started on the day before PuppetConf, or the first day of PuppetConf. So she got dropped a little bit in the deep end. Dawn joined us from Intel, where she was at the Migo and Tizen community manager. She's got a long history of being a community manager and a strong background in community metrics, and you'll start to see a bit more of our metrics published. I think the first post went live on the website a couple of days ago, showing you our monthly community metrics. And also she's published, I think she published a book about community metrics as well, so that's worth a read if you're interested in that sort of thing. And she's going to spend the first month of her job sort of really coming to events like this, talking to members of the community, finding out what's wrong, things you want to change. So she's here all day. Come and bug her if there are things that bother you, pull requests that haven't been actioned, all of that sort of stuff. But this gives us a really clear focus moving forward, have someone whose sole job is to look after the community. And I want to talk a bit now about what we've done recently. And this is going to focus quite strongly on most on the engineering side of things. What's happened with Puppet 3.0, which came out actually at PuppetConf, and what we have planned in the future. One of the big things we've done is that you see when you started to look at Puppet manifests a few years ago, you started to see lots of really interesting things. And one of the really interesting things was lots of case statements with big, long collections of clauses. If this, or case this, or this piece of information, and you ended up with what you call a mix of logic and data. And one of the big things we've done as part of Puppet 3.0 is we're actually trying to clean that up. We're actually trying to say that there are two types of information in your Puppet manifest. There's the actual data, the IP address of this NTP server is 1234. And then the bit you actually want to manage, like the logic itself, like the resources and things like that. I'm going to try and separate those. And in order to do that, we've adopted a tool that Ari Panar, who wrote MCollective, also wrote called Hira, or Hira. I'm not sure Americans pronounce it differently than I do. So essentially this is it's a data lookup store. So it's essentially a way of externalizing all of the data that you would previously put in, the IP addresses, the variables, externalizing that data away from your Puppet manifests. And in order to do that, in Puppet 3.0, it requires no changes to your manifests. Your variables will inherently look up Hira. And it's really easy to configure as a backend. You can add things like text files, CSV, JSON, YAML, all that sort of stuff to it. Ruby 193, you notice a bunch of platforms are moving to Ruby 193 as a default. We've sort of supported 193 for the last 3 or 4 releases, but some weird things broke. As part of 3.0, it's actually a fully supported platform, and if anything breaks, it's a legitimate bug we haven't seen, and we'll fix it. But from now on, you should be able to move forward with 193, which provides a little bit of performance enhancement over 187. And there's a bunch of bugs that were in 187 and earlier that are fixed in 193. The Puppet module tool and the image here, if some of you may know Kelsey Hightower, who wrote most of the original Puppet module tool stuff. He called the project Geordie LaForge. Those of you who have Star Trek references will recognise the background. Kelsey was is our sole African-American employee, so he gets away with making the joke. Puppet module tool ships with 3.0. So at the moment, the Puppet module tool is really good at building modules, pulling modules down from the Forge. It's not really good at the thing that we actually wish it was, which is actually publishing modules, and I'll get to talk a bit about what's happening there. So what's shipped to 3.0 allows you to browse the module Forge, which is now a bit more interesting because it has 500 modules in it as opposed to 50. It allows you to build modules, but you still have to manually upload. But as of Monday week, I believe is the date. Is Ken Barber somewhere around? He's not here. Okay, there he is. As of Monday week, not next Monday, but the Monday after, we'll be releasing a new version of the Forge, and it will have a publishing API. And the Puppet module tool will be updated sometime after that to support that API, which means from the command line, you'll be able to build your module and then publish it to the Forge, which should make it considerably easier. Some of you may know Chris Bayart, who works at Intuits in Belgium. Chris has been nagging me for the last 12 months about how stupid the Forge is and why can't I publish my modules. And I would publish my modules if you just had a decent API. So we're now going to have a decent API, and Ken will be talking a bit later about some of that, possibly, maybe. Okay, but you can bug him about the API, and you can get a bit of a preview of what it's going to be like. As part of that, also, the Forge is going to be significantly enhanced. Currently, it's very hard to tell what's a good module. So you can look in the Forge, and there's 5 modules that manage Apache. So which one do I choose? It's hard to tell what operating system they support. It's hard to tell whether anyone's ever downloaded that one or whether they've rated it. So some of the things we're going to be doing is better rating systems, better indications of what supports things, so you'll be able to make determinations. Okay, well this module only supports Ubuntu. I'm going to choose the one that supports CentOS as well as Ubuntu and Debian. And together with that, there'll be a significant enhancement of the way the module Forge actually looks. It's kind of an ugly Rails application right now. It's going to be a much prettier application with actual people who design websites for a living to building it instead of sysadmins like me. So lots of cool stuff there. Variable scope. This is another hated topic in the Puppet community. Dynamic scoping is going to go away. It was a stupid idea. We're really sorry. You know, it's embarrassing, but at least it's going to get fixed. So variable scoping will now be really simple. It'll be local variables first, then inherited, then node variables, then global variables. It'll be really simple, and it'll tell you exactly when you have not defined something in the right place. It won't give you a creepy weird error saying, you know, blah, 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 you know, is not there. It'll say that, you know, it can't look up the scope of this variable in this particular scope, which should remove a significant number of problems people have building Puppet manifests and having them behave in strange ways. So some of you may have seen some graphs we put out around the Puppet 3.0 release. We use Puppet internally to manage all of our systems. And when we upgraded the internal Puppet masters to 3.0, one of my colleagues said, there's something weird with the graph. And I went, which graph? And he goes, the Puppet CPU usage. And I went, what do you mean weird? And he said, well, after the first runs we did after we installed Puppet 3.0, the graph looks like it's fallen off a cliff. And I went, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And he printed out the graph out, and between 30 and 40% increase in performance. And that's I reckon for a release, that's pretty impressive. Considering that Puppet's performance on occasion has sucked really badly, 30 to 40%, we were really impressed by the fact that it's less CPU, less memory, runs are much faster, and this is basically, some of you may know Daniel Pittman, who's one of our developers. Daniel basically spent 3 weeks in the guts of Puppet going, oh my God, why did Luke do that? He's an idiot, and fixing all of that code. As a result, there's been significant sort of improvements. This is part of an overall sort of performance improvement strategy, and we're doing a lot more performance testing in the next few months. And the idea is really to rip the guts out of a lot of subsystems that have never been touched in quite a long time and improve the performance. As part of that, we'll probably be looking at a few different things. There's been a long-standing argument in the community that Ruby is not necessarily the best tool to have written Puppet in. I like Ruby, but yes, there's probably some elements of that. And we may look at things like the Puppet client may end up being written in a different language. So people have tossed up sort of Scala or Erlang and all sorts of alternatives. Probably more likely to be something like C or something like that, where it's actually a small, really fast little simple agent that doesn't do very much, because effectively the agent doesn't really do very much. It really takes the catalog, processes the resources, and sends a report. That's not a complicated bit of functionality. In fact, Ken Barber, who's here earlier, has a prototype version of that client. Is that public, that repo, or not? The C client thing for, is that a public repo? Okay, all right, well, it didn't work, but there's moves to do that anyway. One of the other big gripes about Puppet, particularly if you use environments, is that it was really great that clients could set the environment, except when it wasn't. That was usually for things like, oh my God, somebody has decided to set the client from pre-production to production, and all of a sudden one of your pre-production hosts became into production, because you couldn't control it or you couldn't guarantee from the master that it was going to be set to a particular environment. So we consider that a bug. It took us a couple of years to fix it, mainly because it probably took us a couple of years to work out what the hell happened. But it's been fixed, and now the master is the definitive source for setting your environment. So from a security perspective, someone can no longer get onto your system and change the environment, and you can be ensured that from the master you actually get the right client, the right environment. Whoops, I hit one too far, and now it doesn't want to go back. Some of you may also be familiar with the fact that plugin sync was never there were unpredictable things about plugin sync, and it's not exactly a great system. It tends to plug in sync things to the master and the client when it probably should only send them to the master, like functions and reports. It wasn't very good when it came to identifying what was a thing you should load as a library as Ruby, and what was a plugin that should be used in Puppet. It tended to fail on the first run, so you could only, you plug in sync something, and then it took 2 runs before that plug-in sync thing was available. That's all been fixed in 3.0. So now if you load things like something like a report processor or a fact or a function, you can use that on the run that's actually loaded in, which is a significant enhancement in the way plug-in sync worked. There's a few DSL Polish things. We've added the unless to the language, keywords as resource parameters and properties, fixed the number of parser bugs. We're really sorry about introducing dashes. That's my fault entirely. I thought it was a good idea. I was clearly wrong. As a result, there's a couple of releases in the 2.7 series where the regex that looks at variable names is a little bit not greedy enough, and it tends to ignore everything after the dash. Yeah, I fucked that one up. There's more of this coming. We've now got someone who actually curates the language. We've actually got a UX designer whose job it is to look at the language and go, well, that was a stupid idea, we should do it better. And if you have input you want to do to that, then, I mean, log tickets now, because it's a good opportunity to say, we want to make the language a bit more sane. As part of that, some of you may have seen we did a Google Summer of Code project that involved completely rewriting the Ruby DSL. So there's now an actually reasonably fully functional Ruby DSL, which hopefully will get merged in the next couple of months. There's a bunch of fixes that need to be made to the code the student produced, but if you want to write your Puppet manifests in Ruby, this makes it provides the full scope of functionality, whereas the previous Ruby DSL was a little bit limited. So some of you may see the changelog for Puppet 3.0. There were a lot of bugs fixed, a significant amount of code cleanup, performance enhancement, and a significant what the engineers call correctness fixes, which is also known as Luke's code sucks. Most of those aren't visible to you, but the fact that this sets us up to actually build a much stronger platform than what we had previously. So what shipped? Puppet 3.0, Factor 2.0, and Hero 1. Hero is obviously integrated with Puppet 3. Factor 2.0 shipped. It's not quite what we want it to be, and I'll talk a little bit about what we actually want it to be and where it went wrong. So one of the things you may have noticed over the last few years, and this is sort of Luke's problem and sort of my fault, was that Puppet versioning was always a bit strange. So when I first got involved in the project, we had 0.24 was the first, or 2.3 was one of the first releases I worked on. When we actually sort of looked at incrementing releases, I think the first 0.25 release was the first thing where we started to remove XML RPC and replace it with REST APIs. Sadly, instead of going, that probably is 0.5 of a release, and we considered, oh, that was 0.25, and then we'd 0.251 and 2 and 3, and they were significant feature releases. But the version number didn't represent that at all. So what we've moved to is that we've moved with semantic versioning, so that you really simply understand what, for a semantic version, what it actually means is that a major release, so the 3 dot part of the release, means that this has breaking changes from 2 dot. And in the past, it was somewhat unpredictable. You could go between 2.6 and 2.7 and not be really sure what was API compatible. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. We make pretty much a guarantee to say that if you use 2 point something and you move to 3 point something, there will be things that break. You will have to look at your manifests. Most of the time that most of the time, we're going to provide really good deprecation warnings. You're going to see there's a bunch of deprecation warnings in 3 when you run it against 2.7 manifests. Minor versions will be compatible with new features. So 3.1 will be new features, but it will be completely compatible, backwards compatible with 3.0. For those of you who think that's something that's unusual for the Puppet community, this will be a new and exciting difference. And lastly, the final thing is the patch version. So just be bug fixes with no behavioral or functional changes. As opposed to the current model, which is not so great. So that's something the engineering team has committed to, and you'll see that across all of our applications moving forward. We'll move to that semantic versioning. Version numbers match the way we write and ship code, and you can be confident about the scope of changes in any release. So one of the things that we're trying to do better is ship code faster, and you've probably seen that a number of the release candidates and a number of the products get released on a more scheduled basis. And we want to provide OS packages for release candidates. So obviously when we've just provided tarballs in the past, it's a pain in the ass to have to actually build stuff from that. So we're going to start providing debs and RPMs, and maybe gems as well. I think gem versioning is not very good with release candidate code. But we're going to provide those so that it's easy for you to be able to upgrade and test your environment. So we saw that with the 3.0 release. There were OS packages available for all of those, and they'll be put in our package repos. There's some discussion how we're going to handle those package repos, but if you have ideas about how that can work, then please let the release team, which is Michael Stonke, know. Monthly development releases. So Waldorf is the code name for the next major release after Telly. I think Waldorf will be 4 point something, but engineering will make that determination. We'll ship a tested version every month as a preview, and that way, you don't have what we had with Telly, which was between 2.7 and 3. There was about a 8 to 10 month gap, and you be able to have an opportunity to try things out. And plus, we'll also ship open source packages. So you'll see some stuff on the mailing list in the next few weeks from Deepak, Andy Parker, who runs the platform team from an engineering perspective. We'll actually start publishing some of this information. Things that are not done yet, or we didn't get to. We wish we'd fix parameterized classes. When we first introduced it, it was a really nice idea. Unfortunately, it didn't work everywhere. I would go, you should use this, and someone would go, no, you shouldn't, it's broken. And I'd be like, no, it isn't. Oh, yes, it is, which is always fairly disappointing. We haven't fixed all of the bugs yet. We fixed a significant number of them. Hopefully, in one of the next releases, you'll find that parameterized classes work everywhere and it's all sane. Undef versus nil, this is another one that's really weird. Puppet variables, if you leave them undefined, sometimes they're nil and sometimes they're not. That's not great. Classes with the dash in the name, again, my fault. We're going to fix that too. You may have seen an email recently. We've decided to deprecate the dashboard. The dashboard was built in the very early stages when I worked at Puppet Labs. It was built by a bunch of Rails developers, which meant that it's somewhat more elegant than most of our web properties, but it's still not great. It's built on Rails 2.0, and it was never particularly was something that gelled with us as people in the community didn't really like it. I must admit, if I had to choose between the old dashboard and Foreman, I probably would have chosen Foreman. And I think Ohad Levy's done an awesome job of building that. So we're going to get rid of the dashboard, and we're going to replace it with two open source tools. The first one is the parts of the dashboard that did node classification, the ENC stuff. We're going to build a service, an API-driven service, with a very, very simple front end. And that will allow you to do node classification. So that's a big step forward for us. Having an API-driven service to classify your nodes will make things significantly easier to build integrations and significantly easier to use. And the reporting portion of the dashboard we're going to replace with we're going to move reports into PuppetDB, which we released earlier in the year, and we're going to provide a simple graphical interface on top of the PuppetDB API. And that'll entirely be API-driven, so if you want to build your own interface, Ohad will be able to update Foreman to use that API, and it'll be a relatively sort of simple interface. Puppet Labs will probably build a number of commercial applications on top of both of those, and there'll be things like more sophisticated analytics or advanced reporting, things that most of our open source users either build for themselves or aren't particularly interested in. Puppet Labs modules needed more attention. You may have seen there's a flurry of bug fixes last night. There was a bunch of guys in the office in Portland who fixed a bunch of our modules. We've started shipping a bunch more modules. The operations team, our internal operations team, shipped about 10 modules in the last couple of months to our Puppet Labs Dash operations space. And you'll see that a bunch of the modules have been improved. I think even VCS repo, which is a horrible, horrible hack, got improved a bit and actually works a bit better than what it does. So you're going to see a bit more investment in that, and you're going to see a bit more of those modules moving towards what we would say is like a blessed module. Like a Puppet Labs thinks this module is really good, and we will support it if it doesn't work. And that should make it easier to choose some modules on the Forge. Things that we didn't get rid of, or rather were delayed. We had intended in 3.0 to get rid of the import function. Those of you who still use import don't. It's a performance hog, it's a pain in the ass, and it's not very much fun. Use modules. Auto-loading works really well. It's really fast. If you use import, you have fstats everywhere in your fucking file system, and it's awful. So this way, we actually prevent removing import entirely. Will probably be the 4.0 release at this rate, but it will be deprecated sometime in the 3 release, and you'll get a warning saying, please remove your import statements. Some of you may know what the static compiler is. The static compiler, currently when Puppet builds its catalog, it builds the catalog and ships it to the client, and the client makes a number of calls, HTTP gets back to the master to say, get me this file, or get me this particular object. The static compiler essentially produces a much simpler catalog where most of that information is shipped with the catalog. Instead of having to make multiple calls back and forth to the Puppet master, you get things like this is the right hash for the objects that shipped. and it significantly reduces the amount of network traffic between the master and the client. We were going to make that the default in 3.0, and we didn't, and that'll probably be in the 4.0 release as well. The last one is something I've been griping about for a long time. Factor only produces variables that are strings, even though they look like things that shouldn't be strings, like numbers. Arrays and hashes are kind of a pain. You essentially have to manipulate those in the Puppet manifest itself. So we're going to replace that entirely with typed and structured facts. So it'll probably be a JSON-style-esque output. And that's something we had hoped to do in Factor 2.0, but probably we'll have to wait till Factor 3. And the reason for that is that using factor facts inside Puppet is a reasonably complex sort of entity at the moment. And we didn't want to break significant parts of Puppet without being able to, we wanted to, unlike parameterized classes, we wanted to actually work out of the box first time. So there's a bunch of fixes that needed to make it in Puppet first, and most of those are sort of either done or on the way, and after that we'll be able to ship proper structured and typed facts. And essentially this is one of the part of the new promises. On release, new features should actually work the way we promised they work. New and exciting concept. So next challenges for the engineering team is walled-off, and then kicking ass and taking names, as they call it. Schedule transparency, so actually giving you an indication of what's coming and what's in it. Redmine accepted tickets. This is essentially, we're treating this as a Scrum unsorted product backlog. We are moving the model forward so that if you vote for a ticket, that will be what the engineering team uses to make a determination about fixing that ticket. So if you have tickets that have been outstanding, haven't got any action, vote for them, get your friends to vote for them, get your mum to vote for them. And that will be the thing that when they sort the product backlog, that will be the things they actually pay attention to. That will be the things that they say, somebody actually cares about this. There's a lot of bugs in the Puppet, in the Redmine instance for Puppet. Probably a lot of them are stale and aren't things we're going to fix, but things you actually care about, please vote for. In Redmine, a target version means that of 3.x or whatever the thing means, that we might fix this before 4.0. So it's probably going to be minor features and bugs, things that are not backwards compatibility broken. Target open tickets, the next numeric release, means that trying to fix that release. We're still shipping time-based product, so every time we get to an end of a month or the end of the sprint, there will be a line drawn in the sand and a release will be cut. And that means that some things will miss that date, but we will try and actually keep those up to date so that it has a target version in there that actually is a promise, as opposed to sort of when I did it was sort of a wild-ass guess. Other experiments. You'll see there's some discussion internally recently about expanding the number of committers for the Puppet project. We've not been very good at that. We've not been very good at building community around, development community around there. And part of that's because our community is largely sysadmins, and you're all busy people, and committing code to a project is a non-trivial exercise for you guys. Whereas developers, that's not a break in their routine. So we're actually going to have some communication on the main list over the next few weeks about how we're going to build the governance model for Puppet and allow people to actually, a few more people to actually commit to the project. And if you are interested in becoming a committer, come talk to me, talk to the engineering team, or use the Puppet dev list. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of try a couple of different experiments as governance models. And if you have ideas about how that should work, or you work on other projects where that works better, please let us know, and we'll see if we can try and make it all work. This is all fairly speculative. The engineering team made me promise that I wasn't going to make any promises. So the static compiler, content references, not URIs, a single file catalog, an easier push model. These are a few things that are sort of being talked about. And if you're interested in any of these specifically, it's worth pinging the engineering team on the Puppet dev list or on IRC and asking about specific components, or if you have things you would like, design aspects of this, then now's the time to speak up. Structured facts, I said JSON is the template for that. Third-party facts only initially, so we'll only look at it'll be the stuff that we ship as part of the core. It won't actually it will have backwards compatibility for things that are shipped externally. Better graph processing. We're going to improve the graph handling. Some of you may be familiar with the anchor pattern. It's a horrible hack that I think Dan Bodie came up with. and we're going to actually fix that so that how we structure the ordering of things is a bit more clear. Those of you who don't know, in 2.70, there used to be a complaint that Puppet resources were sort of randomly ordered per run. So anything that didn't have a relationship between it, resources that weren't connected by some sort of meta parameter, would happen in whatever order they happen to be sorted to. In 2.7, we changed that so that after your relationships are calculated in the graph, everything else runs, the resources run in the same order every single time, which means you'll never get any surprises about that. If it's broken, it'll be broken every single time. It won't randomly change and therefore potentially create a new problem. Improvements to performance and logic. And this is really designed to, so currently Puppet is a very node-centric tool, so you configure a node at a time, but ultimately you don't really care about your nodes, you care about the services that run on those nodes. And if you want to do proper things like cross-node orchestration and look at services made up of whole groups of nodes, we need to improve the graph to be able to do things like what happens when you build a relationship between this graph and another graph, so two nodes and their relationship. And a lot of this sort of work is designed to be able to make that easier. And you'll see over the next 12 months, we'll be releasing some tools that take advantage of that, both from a management perspective, integration with things like mCollective to do orchestration, and also things like visualizations. I think Deepak had a very good demonstration at PuppetConf, which shows you a PuppetDB visualization of a number of catalogs. He did a lava lamp sort of demo, I think. I think that's available on one of the videos. But there'll be a number of things like that allow you to do things like, here's the graph of my node, what happens if I take this resource away? What resources are impacted? And then we look at that over a larger scale, over a series of nodes. What happens if I poke this one node? What's the effect across my whole environment? And that allows you to do a lot of things like a global no-op mode, is to be able to say, what happens if I change my Apache resource? The flow and impact across all my web clusters, here's the flow and impact to my load balancer, and allow you to do some real-time sort of change management planning. Better environments. One of the things we can't do yet is that different versions of a type or provider aren't possible in different environments, which makes it very hard to plan forward. And we'll be fixing that particular problem. It's not an easy problem to fix, but will hopefully allow you to do things like having a different version of a type in staging and production and so on and so forth. Cleaner documented code. That when Daniel Pittman started in engineering, one of his biggest complaints was that it's very hard to use Puppet as a library. So Puppet's API is not 100% clear if you're building a type or a provider. It's not an easy thing to understand. So we're going to make that a lot cleaner. We're going to refactor a bunch of those interfaces. So the building types providers, it's fairly consistent, it's fairly simple, and there will be some really solid examples to be able to build your own integrations on top of. So that's all I had to say. I'm going to hand over to Ralph, who I haven't given very much time at all, but he's going to talk a bit about education and certification.
Thank you, James. Einen schönen guten Morgen. Morgen. Ja, in Düsseldorf sagt man auch Moin, Moin. Thank you, James, for the introduction. And my name is Ralph Lux. I'm the Technical Training Director at Puppet Labs, and I do come from Düsseldorf originally, though I've been living in the United States for longer than I care to admit. So, which button? Ah, good. Good to know. So I'm here to talk about our new certification program that we have just launched at PuppetConf. Who here has heard about Puppet certification? A few of you? Awesome, awesome, good job. So I want to tell you a little bit more about it, what it is, what we have in it, and how you can become certified. So why would you care about Puppet certification? Because there is a space in where we all say, here we are going to be successful. And that space sometimes is a little undefined. Puppet certification helps you define that space by knowing what are the skills that are required to be successful with Puppet, and by showing that you have those skills and you have proven that you have those skills, which is good for employers because they can now look for people that are Puppet certified. It's good for you because you can now say, I'm Puppet certified. When I started with Puppet a little while ago, we looked at creating a curriculum and a certification path. And we have done that now with the release of the Puppet Fundamentals course that is rolling out worldwide as we speak. And we have done it with the creation of 2 certifications built on top of that. One, a Puppet Professional certification for administrators, and another one, a Puppet Developer certification for developers who want to extend Puppet beyond that. We are still working on the very last step, the level 400 there, which is going to be a hands-on certification for somebody who wants to show that they know not only administration but also development and can take Puppet to the next level. So what have we launched? We've launched a Puppet Professional certification. It's based on an exam of 60 questions, system administration using Puppet. You get 90 minutes to take it. It is available at all Pearson VUE testing centers. There's about 5,000 of them worldwide, including several here in Germany. And it costs $200 to take the exam. If you pass the exam, then you are Puppet certified. You're a certified Puppet professional. You get a certificate. You get some logos that you can add to your business card. The tests on Puppet Open Source 2.712 or later, we've tried very hard to make the questions not version specific, but technology specific. And it also does test on Puppet Enterprise 2.5. So a lot of people are asking, why do I need to know Puppet Enterprise if I only want to work on Puppet Open Source? The answer to that is that we have one certification and it checks for knowledge of all of our products. However, you do not have to purchase Puppet Enterprise first to in fact, become knowledgeable. The question percentage is less than 20% on Puppet Enterprise, and a lot of people we've talked to said that they downloaded the free version of Puppet Enterprise, evaluated it, and that gave them enough to pass the test on those questions. And obviously, we want to make sure that if you hire somebody or if you say you're Puppet certified, that you understand all of our products. Puppet Developer is an exam that is currently in beta, which means that it is not completely finished yet. We are waiting for inputs from people like yourselves to take the exam and actually tell us which questions are good and which questions are not good. So that comes with a good side and a bad side. The good side is that while the exam is in beta, it is free of charge. If you send an email to me or to certification@puppet.com, we will send you a voucher code so you can take the exam and register for it without having to pay for it. That's the good side. The bad side is that instead of 60 questions, it's 195 questions. Instead of 2 hours, we give you 4.5 hours to complete the exam. The reason for that is that we ask you for each question to give us a few comments, so that once we have 100 people who have taken the exam, we can go to then make an evaluation on which questions we want to keep. We fully intend on throwing away about 75 of those questions. We just don't know which 75 yet. That's what we need you to tell us. Okay. So if I have one request today, it is that if you have at all interest in Puppet development and being a certified Puppet developer, write to me, get the voucher code, go ahead and register, and take the exam. Once we have 100 people taking the exams, we'll be in a much better position to say this is a valid exam that we can evaluate people against. Again, it tests on open source and on Puppet Enterprise, but as you would expect for a developer exam, the percentage of enterprise-specific questions is significantly lower than on the administrator exam. So what do you need to do to prepare for exams? The only requirement that we have for exams is hands-on experience. So if you want to become certified in Puppet, we require that you work with Puppet. All right? So that's the only thing that is a requirement, either with just the Puppet software for the Puppet professional or with development with Ruby if you want to be a Puppet developer. We do have some recommendations. Obviously, as the education director, I would very much appreciate it if you took our training courses, and those training courses are written to help prepare you for the exam. However, it's not a requirement, and in fact, only taking the course is not going to be sufficient to prepare you for the exam. You have to take the course and have hands-on experience. There are some other things that are available. We have free practice exams available on our website that you can take to give you 20 questions. They're going to give you a feel for what type of questions to expect on the exam. We have a documentation available for Puppet Enterprise the user's guide for 2.5. We have a virtual machine file available on our website that you can download to test and try your hand at using Puppet, even if you don't have machines that you want to manage with Puppet yet, or if you don't necessarily want to try your knowledge on your production environment. We also have 2 books, one of which is Puppet, Pro Puppet, and it's written by our own James Turnbull and Jeff McCune. And the other one is a book that is about to come out and will be available called Puppet Types and Providers. It's written by Dan Bodie and Nan Liu, and we recommend that for the developer exam. And then last but certainly not least, we have a whole website, puppetlabs.com services certification, that has links to all of those resources, including the practice exams and to registration for the exam. Any questions on certification or what to do to prepare for it? Again, my request for all of you is, if you are interested in the Puppet Developer certification, please help us create a really good certification by taking the beta exam and then giving us your feedback on what are good questions and what are not. Once you are certified, here's what success looks like. You'll get a beautifully handcrafted certificate. More importantly, you get the privilege to brag and call yourself a Puppet certified professional or a Puppet certified developer. And you're on your way to becoming a certified Puppet master, which will be the final certification in the end. And just always remember that if you think that training somebody and then seeing them leave is a bad thing, it's even worse if you don't train them and they stay with you. Thank you.
I probably haven't left a huge amount of time for questions, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to jump in quickly now, or I'll be here during the rest of the day sitting over my laptop looking worried. So, questions?
Yeah, well, the Marriott collective, no news about that, so I wondered.
Sorry, I didn't include that. Some of you may saw there was a bug release out this week, so 2 point... sorry, the question was just asked about Marionette Collective, what's happening with that. There was actually a bug release out this week, I think, 2 point something, and there'll be a feature release out, I think, in the next couple of months. Ari's the best person to ask, though, but we are, you will continue to see a bunch of work on M Collective, and some things that we're looking at really for sort of future architecture of Puppet is that we'll probably replace a lot of the Puppet internal components with message queues, and that means that you'll see M Collective sort of and Puppet sort of merge a little bit more. So it doesn't make sense doing a bunch of things we do now. For example, compiling catalogs is a very single-threaded sort of process, where realistically a better way of compiling catalogs would be create a bunch of message queues, message queue, and create a bunch of catalog compilers, and you can have that sort of a much more scalable sort of approach. So you'll see a lot more work around M Collective, and you'll see a bunch of integration between M Collective and Puppet. Wow, I wowed you all into silence. Either that or my English was so fast and so confusing, you're all leaning there going, who the fuck is this guy? Okay, Danke, thank you very much.